Well, sounds like you guys are fairly well thought out in regards to drawing the lines and some of the themes that have been at play throughout the entirety of our last few seasons. Well, season one and this one in regards to the coterie. The very real themes at play center around the undone, the forgotten, the ghosts of the past, the threads left lying, and how they might trip us up in the present, or how they do trip us up in the present. Oftentimes, I hint at the idea that there was a TED talk that I watched years ago, and it was with some alphabet agency negotiator. And it pertained to the idea of just because you decide a thing doesn't mean that you're going to do a thing. One of the many facets that particular alphabet agency trained into their negotiator is just because you get the decision doesn't mean you get the action. You have to account for both facets because while you, myself, and most of the entirety of the world every morning or every evening decide that we will have a survivable, happy, joyous day. That doesn't mean that's what actually happens. And just because we decide that we're not going to allow the slings and arrows of day-to-day survival affect us, doesn't mean that's what happens. Just because you decide that you're going to go to the bank and make your deposit, you're going to go home, everything's going to be peaceful and accounted for, doesn't mean that actually was what happened. Oftentimes, when making decisions, we don't consider them separate from the actions, and that sets us up for failure more times than not. In situations where you're negotiating for someone's life, the person who you're negotiating with might decide that you are trustworthy, but they don't put the action to investing that actual trust. You have to get both the decision and the action. You have to have the plan and the follow-through. That's been the underlying thread throughout the entirety of the season, because there have been choices, there have been moments, there have been asides where the decision was, and yet the actions don't balance that scale. The actions don't match that decision. This has been an ongoing issue for every member of the coterie at one point or another. There was the decision to remove the silent angel investor from having any say. There was decision to partner with other Tremere and bolster the defenses. There was the decision to buy the shelter's freedom from all of the pernicious and dedicated enemies aligned against their common good. There was the decision to utilize the strength of numbers to change the stars of the shelter. There was the decision to not kill, to not violate, to not otherwise break the traditions. And well, time and time again, the actions didn't match those decisions. It's unfortunately the nature of not just the game, but these characters' lives. Many decisions are made, few actions are taken, and what's left lying on the table amasses interest. All of the crumbs thought swept away, all of the stains compiling and conflating one atop the next until there's just this conglomeration of something other sitting there on the table, growing life all of its own. The shelter are heroes, some. Heroes to those who want to tear down the systems, to flout the system, those who want another path. They utilize what they've heard, sometimes witnessed, in the great, fantabulous, unbelievable actions that the shelter have managed to get away with. Others see them as the greatest of enemies. They stand as a living an unliving example of all that is wrong with those youth, those children, those fledglings who would flout the rules, who would thumb their nose at tradition. They are also, in no small bit of exaggeration, tyrants of the North Pole. They have ruled, as far as the rest of the city is concerned, an absolute 100% freedom of responsibility and accountability the north side of Chicago. Once you make it across Hollywood, once you make it into the Rogers Park neighborhood, you know you are wholly and horribly, potentially at the whim and will of the shelter. Some people do it on purpose to make a name for themselves, like counting coup. They rush forward and place a hand against the angry buffalo and then rush away. The buffalo, of course, being the shelter, proving that they were tough enough, smart enough, fast enough, brave enough to hunt there at Ridge and Toohey, which is literally the very edge of all that is considered the shelter's territory. It is literally 1 foot over the line. But having stories, having proof and witnesses that you successfully managed to hunt there on Chicago Avenue, just by Juneway Terrace, right there by Triangle Park, which is literally 2 steps into the shelter's territory, but proving that you were able to do so. And now you got yourself a little bit of acclaim. You got yourself a little bit of pixie dust, a little bit of a legend growing for yourself, because you were able to survive interacting in the domain. And it's the only domain for a coterie that is not at the beck and call of every member of the Primogen. It is the only domain in the entirety of Chicago that is not a singular building or a apartment complex. It is the only domain in all of contiguous Chicago that is ruled by someone not playing the game. Because that's what it is. The game of power. Understanding where it flows and controlling that flow is the game that every notable kindred plays. Some play it better than others. Some complain about the rules. Some are not sure what game it is that they are playing, but they play all the same. The shelters have been iconoclastic. They've been mavericks. They've been marauding angels of vengeance, and not the typical cherubic winged, fat bottomed child that most people envision, nor the robed, asexual, glowing, radiant, resplendent, bipedal human. No. We mean the fully hallucinogenic, indescribable horror that were the angels mentioned in the Bible and the Korah and the Kabbalah. These multi-winged, indescribable things of abject awe. Not beauty, not hideousness, just awe. Something so overwhelmingly incomprehensible and powerful that no words can adequately describe it. That's what the shelter has been. And unfortunately, for them, a little more than half a decade into them actively being engaged in the happenings of the city, a little more than 20 years from the founding of the shelter, the actual Harrisboro shelter. And it is very much time to either cash out, cash in, or go bust. All of the chickens have come home to roost. For the first time in forever, as far as some might exaggerate. 90% of the living members, present and past, of the coterie are operating within the Chicagoland area. All of the kaiju have come home. contest of champions has begun. And on that note, with that in mind, I'd like to very much thank you all for being here. Your time, as always, is valued. Your efforts and your energies are appreciated. Your enjoyment is hoped for. And no matter how many times I say it, it is always from the fullness of my heart that I appreciate you taking part in this hobby, in these episodes, in this moment that we've shared 100 times before, and we'll share as often as you all are able. We all have the opportunity. Thank you. Tonight's episode, The Blood of Kings, for Soup City Sins, Shelter is Saved, officially begins. We last left our coterie. All of their many decisions, all of their many conversations have provided food for thought. Who would like to begin with sharing some of that food?
Go, Theo. I believe in you. Don't you dare hide behind that mute option. I know you're there.
Theo is going to start working on being more martial by convincing, cajoling, asking Aaron to show him how to use a gun and train with that gun. And he's going to have, as he's going to acquire a gun. So he can become more martial since we seem to have more and more enemies popping out of the woodwork. And while he's good with a computer, more martial abilities are needed.
Yes, but should he be the one responsible for them, as that's the only weapon that he seems to believe has merit? It's like having a hammer. Everything is a nail. Or worse yet, when it's time to strike the nail, you send your hammer through the sheetrock. You miss the mark. Break a finger. Club a friend. Claw an enemy, even. Having a multiplicity of weapons available is a good thing. But in the world of Kindred, martial weapons are tools or detriments. Nearly every martial engagement is simply an expression of loss. There's not been a martial engagement yet where there has not been a tragic loss. And many of the characters, many of the living members of the world don't realize that loss until they're well past it. They've survived the engagement. They wipe the sweat from their brow. They holster their knife, their gun, their cudgel, and believe the matter is settled. Yet for the individuals that survive or make it away, that faced off against them, now there's a growing enmity. There's a wish and a push to get their lick back. Those who don't survive their engagements, their friends and allies, contacts, people they owed boons to, people they were owed boons by, who are now looking to collect, and that debt falls to the persons responsible should the information get out. There is a caution and balance that is needed in those situations. Some of the greatest tools available to you are your mouth and your perception. Nothing beats 2 feet running, escaping the situation before it becomes untenable. There is a predilection for violence to beget violence. The escalation of ends to carry significant weight. Now, it's quite understandable why Theo would rush towards the opportunity of defense. Facing that is far more weighty. What is it about that that made him fear his existence? Was it watching a member of the Primogen Council cease to be? Was it watching the impunity of these tyrants, this shelter, once more in the existence of that which was promised to be immortal? Just in Theo's short tenure of knowing them, being close enough to put hand to flesh with them, he has watched the exsanguination of two promised immortals with enough social strength and political might that their deaths, their extinguishing of their existence, carries a significant amount of weight. And by significant, even having hidden out from the shelter over the last day, even having vacated their presence, the shadow and pall of those actions weigh on his conscience and soul. Two things he didn't believe he actually had.
Yes, but his fear is actually his fear is more of that Hestia's good friend and Aaron and Theo's more enemy actually terrified him. He had a strong, he put his strong upper lip and kept his head up high, but that guy actually terrified him. And that was a problem. Because if those Primogen can get put down, and that guy came in, shot two people, and walked out in front of Hestia, and she did nothing. What does that mean to him? And he already doesn't like Theo, so that means that he could definitively be murdered by this guy. That terrified him. Knowing that Aaron won't be able to help him. Hestia can't help him. There's a high probability that he could just be murdered. And if he's gonna go down, it's gonna be bringing him down, kicking and screaming to hell with him.
Well, going anti-alphabetical, Miriam, where does that leave you?
Well, she is probably going to continue doing what she has been for the past year, which is consolidating influence, learning how to be more political, and generally gaining contacts and leveraging to both protect herself and her group.
You see that protecting them. And the reason why I ask, just for clarity's sake, how did she see that protecting them? Because in the truth of things, when it comes to the political, allegiances, alliances, armistices, and peace talks have only the weight of the might that could be brought to bear if they are transgressed. Eventually, because of the nature of kindred, much like nations of old, the only way for a nation to prosper or to continue is by the rapid importation of goods, which literally comes only from the spoils of war. Each of the major empires throughout the epochs of time only lasted as long as they did because of the rapid importation of foreign goods, services, labors, and, well, again, the spoils of each nation that has become impoverished throughout that cycle of violent exchange of goods became so because they did not reap any benefits. They didn't reap any of the spoils. They got none of the gains from the wars they engaged with. Oftentimes because they engaged in too many wars at once to offset the hunger, the lack of food, the lack of education, the lack that was they were facing within their own domestic shores. The same thing holds true for the kindred, with each kindred operating as their own individual city-state under the banner of the tower, under the banner of the Anarchs, under the banner of the Ashira, the Sword, the Laban councils, and so forth and so on. Each kindred is its own nation unto itself. Allied with strong nations, they grow, they prosper, they are able to survive the internecine strife and warfare necessary for each of them to continue.
So for her, it's more the modern day backdoor channels. I'll do you a favor, you do me a favor. And as you grow in influence, people want to do you favors.
The funny thing about that, isn't it? You only are able to reap services and favors from others for the potentiality of ceasing the opportunity of warfare against them. Allying with a strong nation, helping a nation that's already strong, increases your stock as well as gives you select information in regards to, if push comes to shove, how to unman that nation. You know when they're stocking salt, when they're saving meat, when they are preparing themselves for an action, and you get an opportunity of either assisting them or laying them low. And it's a game of one-upsmanship, and while the levels of battle have changed, while they're no longer men and women given pole arms and marched off their farms and conscripted into doing so. No, they're gamers who are given controllers and told to fly this drone or pilot this manless vehicle. There are still the very real political wars that are happening all the time because of alliances and dalliances, the avarice and greed. And while the distance from the carnage has grown, the levels of carnage, especially verbal and social, have only grown and magnified. In this day and age, we're able to reach more people. Before, a bad review was 12 customers you would never see because of the bad reviews. They would go home and talk to their friends and their family, and 11 people would decide that you were a shitheel and you wouldn't be worthy of their patronage. Today, a bad review affects hundreds, thousands, millions. The same too for as technologically Luddite-like as the tower is. That reach and those whispers carry far more weight. They reach farther into the shadow, stroking far more dangerous personalities and egos. Would you be so kind as to make our first roll of the night? Would you be so kind as to go ahead and roll your charisma and politics for me, please? And while that roll is happening, S,
Hess is doing on how to use what people are using against them back. Like how to Uno reverse that. How to slowly strip power back away from Sophia. They helped make her. She wants to help break her. That's where her thoughts are. Um, it's not going to be easy, obviously, because this woman now has way more power than she did when they started. But everybody's got a weakness. So, um, she's kind of slowly making inroads and inquiries as to how best to take back their power, to take back the shelter and have it be wholly controlled by them instead of anybody else having their fingers on it. I know it was mentioned and brought up that things are tense between them and the lawyers right now, but that would also have been part of that for her, reaching back out to Capone. She's not going to call him that, but she's going to reach back out to Gabriel and get some advice from older kindred to younger kindred as to how best to make certain things manifest.
Okay. That is all doable. Problem with those alliances that we just spoke about, the problem with working in the shadows, because that's how they win. How empires change the thoughts of the small folk. Things done in the dark eventually come to light. The only problem is most people fail to realize usually the methods for controlling that fire, controlling that light, lies in the hands of those who painted the shadows. We've all heard the aphorism that history is written by the victor. That's not entirely true. History is written and it's co-opted by the victor. You pushing that nun from a helicopter. If you were the victor, that becomes you getting rid of a heretic. You mowing down a family of indigent immigrants from across the border turns into you taking out international terrorists who had subverted your sovereignty. You defrauding the common man of their ability to provide for themselves, and then you offering them a few cents so they can continue on, is you changing your social referendum to help those less blessed as you. History is written, and it is in fact co-opted by the victor. A shade here, hair grown there, a small change in the mascara makeup applied changes the message of the facts as they happen. Instead of it being the mindless ramblings of a madman, there was visions of a world that they sought to avert. So as Hestia reaches out to Mr. Gabriel, her attorney, her counsel, her consigliere, will to be so kind to go ahead and roll your charisma plus either contacts or Mala. And while our second roll of the evening is in the offing, Aaron.
Yeah.
Mr. Right.
Absolutely. And true to the spirit of my forefathers, I'm going to try and do some absolutely ambitious things. So, having had a new and seemingly far more obstructive target pointed out to him, Aaron is going to look and hit the streets for information on Sophia, and more importantly, amidst all that, knowing that there's a lot of magical voodoo bullshit going on. He's going to tie into his own Banu Hakim roots and attempt to, through his network, fledgling though it may be, garner a single dalliance of Sophia's blood. Very much
Reading it and hearing it out loud are two different things. All right. That is a vaunted task.
Oh yeah.
It is. And not for the difficulty that most would understand, because there is the subverting of the security that would naturally occur around a Primogen level kindred. There is the very real, yeah, you might get the blood, but getting out is usually twice as hard as getting in. There's also the fact that while boons are the most valuable thing in the entirety of kindred society, because they require an investment of time, you want a boon that means absolutely nothing to someone who could make cities run dry, someone who could lift up skyscrapers with the merest of wink in the right direction. You want a nothing favor of someone who could move the world on the whim. However, getting them there, letting them get there, helping their climb, investing the time is not an easy thing. The only thing more valuable than a boon, blood. Vitae makes the kindred world go round. Those of extraordinarily potent Vitae guard it like one would the formula for Coca-Cola. Those with an understanding as to what could be wrought with just but a single dram of their Vitae would move heaven and earth to ensure that those who have sampled, tasted, stolen, absconded, or simply wiped up after a very close shave had no access to it or continued access to the living.
Oof.
And for the record, so that we are clear, just so that Aaron understands,
Oh yeah.
Sophia Rossellini, Sophia, formerly Rossi, the pater of the Hecata of Chicago, is a Primogen level kindred.
Well, we all know our luck with those guys.
With the added benefit and bonus of being one of the few quote unquote independence kindred allowed in the capital city of the Camarilla. I wish you luck. And in that regard, with the odds ever being in your favor, or so we hope, would you be so kind as to roll your stamina plus larceny as high as you can?
Oh man, this guy's going straight for the throat. Does stealth break-ins not count, or is break-in a larceny specialty?
Break-in is typically a larceny specialty. This is subverting security.
Okay. Might I transfer that to my larceny skill then?
Guess what? No. Of course you can.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Lord. Alrighty. Any disciplines or merits that I might be able to filter into this? I do have contacts, as priorly established. I do have Silence of Death. But I don't think contacts play into specifically breaking into someone's house.
Nope.
And I don't think Silence of Death states that it adds to your stealth. or anything like that.
Nope, you're just unhurt physically.
I am unheard. Okay, all right. So narratively, it gives me the benefit of my lock-picking attempts not being heard. Now, let's see. All right. Current. We're going to go ahead and do that. This is going to be for Aaron. And this is for all the beans. Oh, wish me luck, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, we do have a failure to reroll. Let's see how this works. I believe in you. That's what we like to see, baby. All right.
Oh no. You all have been marketably well suited to your task. Fate, as always. So that's 15. All right. Step 1. How did that go?
Let's see.
Miriam's hunger was 1, so we shall put that hunger at 1 as the average. Increased difficulty gives us a total of 6.
Oh, that's ugly. Oh, that's ugly on so many accounts.
Sliding along. Castious effort. Dice pool of 5. Difficulty of 2 gives us a dice pool of 7. There's hunger. We will match, which is 1. No one's hungry. The beast isn't crawling in anyone's mind. Just not like. No, I was looking at your hunger.
No, I meant I got 3 successes.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no. Oh, God, I don't like where this is going.
It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
When you got more than 1 hunger. Oh, yeah. You got 3 hunger. Let's make this tragic. We like mad hunger. Because the beast will out. It will take its pound of flesh from every surface nearest it.
Oh, I'm sweating, guys. I feel like a preacher who just got to the good part of the sermon. It's just... Ooh.
All right, and let's see, what does it say? What does fate decide?
Am I the initiator? I feel like I'm the initiator, right?
Are you the initiator breaking in?
Oh,
Yes.
son of a cunt! You evil! You didn't do it for anybody else but me! Alright, well, what was an absolutely remarkable effort on our part is going to have some very steep and interesting consequences therein.
So, fate has spoken. And I'm really not liking the song that she was singing, even though it was very 100% melodic. It was engaging. It stirred the soul and caused the heart to soar. And then somewhere along the way, became the jazziest, most upbeat funeral dirge you have ever heard. Where does Theo practice his firearms?
With our luck, beside the police station.
Besides the police station, in the police station, using their firing area.
Yeah, you broke into the evidence locker and are currently using a gun suspected in murder case.
There was an area that's no longer used in the shelter that, if memory serves, Simone had used for weapons training.
Your memory is equally the measure of the finest, longest aged Swiss styled dairy product.
Okay, so
And
there
this is
is
only
that room no longer exists.
because here's the question. In all of his time away, crawling through the seedy underbelly of the Chicagoland area, in all of his time away, scrounging up dealers who wouldn't jack him for his grip versus just give him fire. Did Theo discuss with, involve the awareness of any other coterie member up to and including Hestia to explore, potentially set off the several score of traps to keep out invaders and intruders, to map out the area so that he might safely traverse and trespass through the shelter unaccompanied?
Yes, of course, he would tell Hestia
Would he?
that
Did
was his
he?
plan.
When? When we're asking what everyone doing, I did not hear that.
Okay.
The devil is not only in the details, but when you miss him is when he chooses to come back and bite and nibble. And as such, would you be so kind as to go ahead and roll your intelligence plus larceny as high as you possibly can?
Okay. All right. Right. All right, Theo, you're the man. You're about to show them how it's done.
Man, Theo, I doubt that. Swear to God, if the opposing dice roll is like one success.
Now, Storyteller, is the larceny that he's pulling off having anything to do with electronic systems?
No.
I was hopeful.
Yeah, I'm dealing with bodyguards.
It was a good hope. It was a good hope. It was a great hope.
It was, in fact, the... See, this is what I'm talking about, Storyteller. You can't keep doing this to us.
So, where was Theo's family born?
Theo's family? They were born um, in New York.
New York. Okay. Okay. Which borough?
He was
He's not from like
actually
he's not from like Staten Island, is he?
no, he's from actually the Bronx.
Okay, the boogie down. Nice. So the reason why I asked, there are certain regional awarenesses that filter in, and they become part of the family's mythos. They become as often used and relied upon as one would, hand soap. It is just constantly there. It lives and breathes with them. It's like knowing that if you want a good sandwich, you go to the bodega. It's like knowing if you miss garbage day, it's not that big of a deal because the two guys that run the truck up and down your particular street, they hang out at X, Y, and Z. So you know that you butter them up with a couple of shots, they'll swing back around. The same thing, the same regional intelligence filters through families down through the years, and in terms of how they operate, how they think, how they plot, and how they plan. Some because they are purposely flouting that generational intelligence and instinct, and some because they turn into the skid. What Theo finds out in his traipsing and travailing through the shelter, whoever their former or originating security officer was, came from a place where violence was not only expected, it was counted on. Now, Theo's a smart guy. He is a hacker by trade, by avocation, by hobby. So solving puzzles is up his alley. Solving mysteries and cracking ciphers are things he does as a hobby. Also, part of the other hobbies that he engages in was at the time online play. Call of Duty, Halo, Gears of War. He played all of those tactical first-person shooter games. So moving around behind enemy lines, while not something that he has experienced physically, is very much ingrained in how he views the world. So as he makes it into the shelter, noticing that most of the others are missing or not there, and looking through cracked doors and peeping around corners, making his way to find a safe place inside to let off a few rounds, to practice and become familiar with his sidearm. The first trap was a piece of tape. At least that's what he thought. Until as he moved his way carefully and gingerly around so that he wouldn't be taken 2 floors down beneath where he was with all of that weight falling on him. When the floor began to go, when he eased around the trap, he realized that was the point of the trap being so obvious and so easy. Escaping it, he felt like $1,000,000. Nothing like getting that adrenaline burst of realizing that even though you've died years ago and you are virtually immortal, there's nothing so as invigorating as watching your life flash before your eyes. The fact that you escaped it. That was until the third trap hit. Pinning his arm to the wall. If he had moved a hair faster, which is clearly what the mind behind this trap thought would happen, he would have been staked. It wouldn't be through his ulna, through his elbow. It would have been through his chest. And not just how most people envision your heart being on the left side. No, it would have been the center mass staking. And making it past it, pulling himself free and eking along the dark corridors, there's some voice at the back of his head, something that he's seen. He's seen various movies and documentaries about the child soldiers of the Congo. And he's never felt more in danger than when considering whether to continue moving forward, to explore, or to try to escape. Because he's very sure he'd bet money on it. He'd bet most things on it. He's not quite willing to bet his life on the fact that back is just as booby-trapped as forward. Whoever did their security, whoever did the physical security inside the shelter, either had a death wish or wanted to ensure that everything else would be. And you see the rats. The rats that Miriam and Hestia have been talking to. The rats that are larger than they should be. The rats that would give the rats you grew up watching in New York a run for their money. 1v5. Their glowing red-tinged eyes moving out of the dark as they hop, skip. At first, it seems like you might be imagining it until you realize, yeah, those are their eyes. And yeah, they're purposely counting their steps and then leaping across there and then counting their steps and then leaping back that way, counting their steps and then taking to a wall as if they've explored or had experience with this area of the shelter and has it mapped out. If only you could talk to those fucking rats. Speaking of talking to rats, Chicago is a political machine. The entirety of the city. Not just the kindred world, but the entirety of the city. Because at the end of the day, politics is the study and application of power. Knowing who's a Vic, who's a Mark, knowing who's going to get done is a life skill. If you want to survive, if you have any hope of doing so, you must study and understand the power in every group dynamic. Because 10 times out of 10, if you walk into a room and you don't know who's going to get got, it is 100% you. Miriam has amassed a good deal of influence in certain facets of society. Miriam has amassed a good deal of attention and purchased loyalty through the services she's managed to begin offering en masse. Miriam, thus far, has been surfing along on the goodwill of the services that she's provided. She is actively changing that. She is throwing herself into the full spectrum political arena. Most people wouldn't even notice that she'd done so. Most people wouldn't even notice that she'd gone from the wading pool to swimming with sharks. She had. And the switch is almost instantaneous. The whispers, the cordial strokes of forearms have gone from passing conversations and niceties of polite conversation to something oftentimes far more lewd in its reach. As she makes her way through and happens to catch sight of Norton, aka the priest Solomon Birch, and his gaggle of hangers-on. She sees not far from him, close enough to take him in, the artist, Aluk Ramas de Leon, the toreador of note who, according to whispers and gossip, is the only toreador free of Brett Stryker's Scrabble power. Timosius has been swept up in having to defend his position. Kathy Glenn's, by extension, because of Timosius and Nero, is having to defend her position. the Noel McCrane, who was not a Toreador, but is believed to be having to choose which side of the coin she's willing to pay. And then above Striker, of course, there's Karin Stanislava, who is the only competition or the progenitor of Toreador. And yet, as you spy the wolves circling, their hungry growls, their upright tails, those raised skyward, denoting that an attack is imminent, would be an easy thing, save in the social confines, casual conversation. Those outward manifestations of aggression are invisible. Instead, it's furtive glances. It's as you pass and stop to greet and make sure everyone's okay. The fact that Norden rests his hands on yours as you gently touch his forearm. Miriam, forgive me for taking too much of your time. And I appreciate the invitation and take you to feat a party for one of our members of the pyramid. You'd be able to do so, wouldn't you?
A trifling matter.
One of your skill, I completely understand how easy it might be, but I don't wish for the feat to be anything even remotely mundane. I don't wish for the feat to be anything even remotely as hideous as Aluk Ramat de Leon, who is one of your frequent invitees. I don't wish for you to involve any of the Blue Bloods. And most tellingly, and this is the part that I'm sure that you will have considerably less concern over. There is a Primogen from Milwaukee who has been recuperating in our environments. Mr. Deltonis, I need you to assure me that of all of the Toreador, he is the only who's allowed this particular soiree. Can you do this for me?
I will do my utmost best to accommodate. Do you have a theme that you are thinking of?
Yes. Vestal Virgins.
I'll be sure to get my best actresses.
Sure you will. A maybe is normally far more than acceptable. However, in this particular case, because it does carry significant weight, I need you to promise me that you will achieve all of the invitation list and bar all other members from the soiree.
Of course.
Despite what Dubiard has said about you, I knew that I could count on you. So much better than that African member of your shelter all those many years ago.
I never had the pleasure of meeting with them.
You didn't know Mr. Sorochi?
Not formally.
That,
I've heard stories.
well, what about that duplicitous outlander, Myers? You were free of him as well, correct?
Yes.
So much. Oh, I feel as if there's a weight taken off of my shoulders. You do understand that the reason why Mr. Canty is the person of interest, the man of the hour, because of his soon-to-be ascension within the Chantry. He has come very far and has applied his trade significantly to the point of which, well, just between you and I, and there's only 3 of us who are aware. Well, 4, counting poor Julius Fairmont. But our Grand Regent, the Primogen of the Tremere, is preparing to step forward as Pontifex of the entire area, the entire Chicagoland domain. And, well, someone must fulfill his position as Regent of Regents. Unfortunately, Mr. Canty has enough national support so that he might easily step into the position soon to be vacated by DeSable. And we'd like to curry favor with him in advance so that we might, well, I'd hate for myself to end up like that Sylvia Rain so many few years ago.
Yes. It would be a tragedy.
And as he gets back to mingling with his other guests, he smiles and carries on. As wily as a certain kindred can be, having the awareness to know where you are in a room and who's in that room is all but second nature. The fact that this was said less than 100 feet from a Luc de Ramas, that is, well, there you are. What is it that you do?
I will go about mingling. Mentally making notes in my head about the invitation list that was requested. Just pleasantries and niceties. After all, one doesn't make a name for themselves without making a name for themselves.
Also doing business. Everyone knows this. Everyone understands this. To make an omelet, you've got to kill a few chickens, as the saying goes. And as Miriam dances and surfs along, being seen, having spoken with, having bumped into, having avoided all of those facets, all of those details. As master of the house, she is immediately aware as to the changing nature of conversations, asides happening, and not more than is comfortable. She finds herself approaching as conversations disperse. More often than she is comfortable with, as she smiles and nods, she gets the effort of someone mistaking who she's talking to and looking around and turning to talk to their nearest associate. As she exits a room, she notices the temperature changing as she departs. The enemy is on the move. The forces are amassing. The wolves' hackles are raised. There's a baring of teeth. All of those lovely, beautiful, easy to recognize physical signs of imminent danger, completely absent in the social environment. All of those clear-cut signs as to whom the predator might be and whom the prey actually is. Not easily recognizable, because after all, timing is everything. pausing in the doorway so that you are properly framed, so that everyone catches. No one's noticing. Ensuring that everyone's drink of choice is properly flavored is part of the host's duty. So as you move closer, you realize that, oh, seems as if they're done drinking. The tips, often paid in purloined jewelry and bits and bobs, this and that, offered to the staff or slipped into aprons, down blouses, into pants pockets, and various other places as signs of appreciation for services well done, grow scarce. Speaking of scarce, it takes far too long to reach Mr. Gabriel's direct line. He's busy. He's over he's in Indiana. He's in Wisconsin. He's in Ohio. He's in Kentucky. He's in Iowa. Oh, he's abroad. He'll be back. Who should I say called? Oh, yeah, he's been meaning to talk to you. He'll be there as soon as he can. When is that? I don't know. As soon as he can, whenever he gets free. Oh, yeah, hey, Miss Green, how you doing? It's good to hear from you. Yeah, no, Mr. Gabriel's a little busy, but he'll get back to you as soon as he can. He's taking care of a couple of other things. Did you all work on that, those mandates that the state is pushing so that you all might be able to afford the, the next step? Oh, hey, Miss Green. Yeah, I passed the message along. He'll get back to you when he's in town. He doesn't want to, the international calls are fairly pricey. Oh, yeah. Hey, Miss Green, thanks for calling. Yeah, no, I passed it along. Mr. Gabriel will give you a call as soon as he can. No, I let him know you called. And on it goes. There's anonymity. There's invisibility. And then there's outright avoidance. And it's very hard, even as busy as you're sure that someone as old as him in the community, in the kindred community could be and might be. The fact that he seems to be avoiding you is troubling. Especially after there's no way that you could fool yourself into thinking that he might not have heard, might not have caught news of, might not be aware as to what the shelter has managed to do yet again. You? What do?
With that being the case, Hester knows where she's not wanted. She's getting the hints. She's a smart cookie. She doesn't want to burn bridges, but at the same time, she's only going to put up with the bullshit for so long. So it might be time to start shopping around for other representation.
Does she do the normal human route that has provided her with so much success thus far?
Oh, no. Enough of those games.
She reach out to find alternative counsel.
Yeah.
Which sources are she using? Which path is she attempting to use to find alternative counsel?
I know I got something on my sheet for this. Because I got 3 dots in resources, 3 dots in Mala. That's not him. I mean, he's a 3-dot lawyer, but like I said, the lawyer's only as good as if he's going to answer your phone calls. So that's a thing. Actually, it's funny because I know we said even though Jonathan's not technically her Mala anymore because he is dead, she still has access to him through being able to speak to the other side. I know it might be a
Summon
really...
spirit.
Yeah, summon spirit, but then I know another method she would use. I know it might be a really strange thing to do. She remembers Sophia's mother. I'm not gonna call your mom on you, but I'm gonna call your mom on you. But it's more because that woman has her fingers in so many different things, and some of them are legit and some of them aren't. So she would have to have some sort of grasp on the human world as to how to get shit done. Either her or the Prince of Dalton, who she has connections with.
Which one is it?
I think the Prince of Dalton might be a little bit of an easier sell to get help from.
Okay. So Hestia is heading south. As far south of the center of the city as the shelter is north and then south. One of the many things that happens, one of the many things that why the term the Chicagoland area is considerably less meaningful. Chicago is a city that was built off of expansion. Chicago's actual city boundaries would fit in the downtown area, would fit in the loop. But through considerable and constant expansion, the boundaries of Chicago have stretched and stretched. Still stretching, though minutely. Because one of the things that many people fail to realize is that while Lake Michigan is an entire lake that touches 3 different states, that the master of Lake Michigan is Chicago. Chicago has water rights. Chicago changed the flow of the river so that they can maintain their control over the inland sea that is Lake Michigan. Chicago, through their uses of Lake Michigan, impact the entire coast of Indiana and most of the coast of Michigan. Chicago, through its hoarding and iron-fisted grip on Lake Michigan, even affects portions of Milwaukee. 3 separate states, Indiana, Michigan, and Milwaukee, who all depend on Lake Michigan for their lifeblood, and Chicago sits as cock of the walk in control of it. All of that to keep in mind, because the outlying suburbs, Orland Park, Tinley Park, Mokina, Madison, Country Club Hills, Markham, and especially Dalton, Harvey, Homewood area, the Thornton Township area, depends on Lake Michigan. As many little rivers, creeks, ponds flow through the area, the lion's share of the water for all of those communities comes from Lake Michigan. They are beholden to Chicago in ways that are unseemly, unsightly. City doing her best to avoid the expressway means that Hestia has the opportunity to take that into consideration. She is heading into Dalton, a city that's dependent on the city of Chicago. She's heading into the princes of that realm, of that domain, and they owe Prince Voivod favors. Well, as Hestia prepares that consideration of that conversation, it is 50 after the hour. Let's take a quick Tim to come back here at the start of the hour, okay? All right, folks, how we doing?
Hey, Hatton.
I am surprisingly still awake.
Why is that a surprise? Are you trying to say that you are willing to doze off on us?
I slept so horribly last night, and then I worked a 10-hour shift today.
You'll be able to sleep and doze and all of that good stuff fairly shortly. Oh, I forgot my drink. 1 sec. Drink accomplished.
Yay!
Is everyone back?
Yeah.
Well, we will circle back around to Hestia's arrival in the domain of Prince Voivod. The Prince Voivod, not just Prince Voivod, the Prince Voivod, Decibel Albu. His consolidation of power came almost as bloodily as the shelter's mythologized past. Almost. Because there were several almost celestial level events that took place. A shifting of the balance, a massacre followed by a tragedy, followed by another massacre, finally ending with the delivery of Arzuli from her hermitage in the south suburbs, from the domain that she was setting up for the Bahari of the Chicagoland area, came at the cost of some large amounts of betrayal. And it also became the site of an urban terrorist attack, the consolidation of the Primaging Council of Thornton Township. All of the members present at that tragedy still bearing scars, either physically, emotionally, or spiritually to this day. So her arrival is a thing. Is a huge, unfortunate thing. But speaking of huge, unfortunate things and tragedies in the offing, Aaron is a skilled operator. He's a skilled investigator. He puts 1 and 1 together to get 11. Oftentimes staying well ahead of the curve, at least in regards to obtaining information. Some of the information that he's come about includes the center of the Hakata domain here in Chicago. He's one of the few individuals outside of the Hakata family that knows how many places around the city are used as safe havens. He's one of the few people outside of the Hakata who has a better grasp on exactly how many full-fledged places exist. And even he is only betting 60% of that. All of that to say is he is aware of where he believes Rossellini might actually retire. He staked the place out, and when he sees the caravan of SUVs and down North Lakewood Avenue, he believes his time is not. All he needs is a drop of blood, a precious small measure of attack. Small enough to fit almost anywhere. He would be able to abscond with it, keep the blade from, well, being touched by any other vitae, and make it off to where he's going. Because he has plans, he has ideas, he has a hope for the future. It involves the potential sacrifice of morals and ethics. And he follows the caravan of vehicles down Lakewood. When they get to Catalpa, to make that left around the corner and head west toward Wayne, he's already cutting through gangways, cutting across alleys, and ensconcing himself in the backyard. Because they always pull up to the front of the building, they circle around the block twice, and then they line the street with the various vehicles. Some further down the block than others. But he knows that 5447 and his neighbor 5449 are the Hakata's secret fallback stronghold when they want to escape the doldrums of, well, business and be invisibly absent. He's cased the security. He knows where the few little cameras in the neighborhood are that might have caught sight of him. He's avoided all of those. He's made it over the back fence. He's made it past the garage. Waiting, ensconced in shadow.
There's what now?
He's waiting in shadow.
Oh,
The six men he expects. The 4 women part of the detail he expects. He expects the long-limbed, athletically inclined sister of Hader. He's one of the few people who understands and knows that she is in fact the sister of the Pater. Victoria Rossi, head of the security. Felix Calixte, the Akata Pater of Thornton Township. He does not, in fact, expect Gid. He does not the tall, railed, thin, mad scientist in tow with Sophia. But he can't account for everything. He knows where security is. He knows that she, as per usual, takes a moment to herself to commune and meditate. And he's not gotten close enough from his surveillance and the information he's been provided to know what it is that she's saying. But the fact that she's sitting with her eyes closed and speaking into a room by herself, he knows that she takes the time before every meeting of guests and before making herself at home meditating. It was a pretty penny getting their surveillance images. It cost a pretty penny being able to stalk her close enough to know that she takes that few moments to herself, always eyes closed, meditating, hands either clasped in her lap or resting on the arms of her chair. Her eyes and everything about her completely deaf, dumb, and blind to what's happening in the room. That would be his perfect opportunity. So he waits, gives them time to make it to the top floor of the building, and gives them a few moments. Then he begins making his way. He's already well aware as to how spaced out they are, how quiet he needs to be. He picks the lock, no issues, no worries whatsoever. He's already tried several times and gotten his speed down as much as possible. He silently moves into the space, gliding across the floor as if he's nothing more than a memory, as if he doesn't exist. Uses the secondary entrance into that back room, not the door that faces where all the security are, the door that comes in off of the kitchen, the hidden secret door into her space, the door that not many would ever know about. But he paid a pretty penny for his surveillance. He enters. The pale, dark-haired, lovely Pater of Chicago is sitting alone, eyes closed, and speaking. Into the ether. She's just there by herself, talking. And when she stops, the moment that he enters, doesn't open her eyes right away. And as he moves across the floor, she says, "Another step, and I'll bring in the guards. Please take a seat."
Kind of like mid footfall, as she says this, he'll lock up, take a look around, just as a precautionary, make sure that there aren't at least easily visible to him guards just standing in the wings right now in this very room, seeing that while her threat is true that she'll call in the guards, there isn't necessarily one of them in here right now with her. It'll take her up on her offer and just 1, 2, 3 footsteps closer, and on the 4th, the click of his hard leather shoes upon the ground is finally heard. You know, this is both easier and harder than I expected.
You've made it farther than I believed. I thought sure making it easy for you would have deterred you. I assumed, but I was wrong. It doesn't happen too often, so I'm curious. Why are you here, Mr. Wright?
kind of rolls his head to one side and then the other as if he's weighing the option, thinking it through as he pulls the chair out and sits down. Information. Think that's about as simple as I can break it down.
That's not true. Well, it's not the whole of the truth. There's specific information that you are after. And while we can go back and forth until I grow bored and draw this farce to a close, it behooves you to use what time we have left as decisively as possible. So which information would you like? Are you worried that I have every intentions or any intentions to harm Hestia, Miriam, and that new dark fellow, Monk, Theodore Monk, the hacker, correct?
I believe so, though I've known him more as a stalker. He says, just kind of going along in a semi-casual tone because he's not really able to afford much in the way of, well, a controlled effort. He'll reach into his leather jacket and pull forth a small cloth roll, set it upon. I assume this is a table, yeah.
There's a table
What
there.
what kind of table am I looking at here? Like glass top, metal, wood?
A polished mirror set into stone.
All right, beautiful.
Now, the problem with it being a polished mirror, it is not a new polished mirror, so there's no thin film hidden behind glass. And no, this is a very old and carved and crafted mirror. There's actually a vein of silver beaten and spread thin behind the encased glass. Something that people have sweat into to create.
All right, all right. Then, as he pulls out this cloth roll with a button strap that's keeping it closed, he'll set it down. It's about a spoon's length to give you a good, accurate mental image, or a spoon's height, I should say. And as he sets it down with a kind of thumb, he'll pop the latch, roll it out, revealing a small scalpel and a glass tube. Just, well, information of a
price?
kind.
Is that your price?
4.
Your people deal with death, the ending of things, the grand change of things. Your people have an understanding that everything has an end. Your people believe that once the physical is no longer viable, that's the end. That's the final destination on this map that we call life. They're wrong, but there's no dissuading fools from their particular vantage points. Luckily, you all have moved predominantly past the religious constraints on your belief of starts, stops, and ends. Again, it's wrong. Life is part of an infinite line. You understand what an infinite line is, right?
In theory, yeah.
Okay. Well, allow me to speak down to you for a moment. An infinite line has no beginning and no end. It means much the same thing of saying chai tea, 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 or look like. Because a line has no beginning and no end. An infinite line, again, is saying the same thing. We exist on this line, this infinite, in a very small spectrum, very small segment of that space. And we consider this existence in that very small section of this infinite as the totality. There's nothing more laughable, because this very small segment that embodies all that you see as physical is such a small, minuscule, minute understanding of the infinite. The entirety of the spectrum before us, after us, existing at the exact same time, is beyond most persons' understanding. And everyone gets so caught up in this small segment, they forget that the line goes on for you. More. But I don't think that will achieve either of our end results. You see, if I wanted to directly harm Hestia, Miriam, Theo, and yourself outside of today, I would have to do so viciously, violently, and without recourse, which costs time and money and manpower. I am aware as to what Hestia might do. I am aware as to what Miriam might do. You? No, we're not friends. I shouldn't tell you, but I will all the same. Of all of the members of the shelter, spread across the entirety of the Midwest and finally being drawn home like flies to shit, of them all, the most indefatigably determined and violent of them all, hateful, is actually Miriam. The most effective in, sacrificing of innocence and giving in to her dark side is Hestia. The most despondent and depressed, who I could easily sway to anything I want them to, is Julius Fairmont, sitting touchably close to the Regent of Regents. And then there's Cameron Orme, kissing distance to the Master of Ceremonies for the Manilians. Then there's Alexander Hunt, the savior, shield, and sword, the grandmother of the cult of Helena. Then there's Bill Hickok, sitting very Judas Iscariot close to the head of the Capone gang.
There is a visible show of disdain, if not bordering on just pure irritation, when Bill's name comes around, but he stamps it out and the letter continue.
And most glaringly, and the thing that everyone fails to realize, whispering into and being whispered into the primogen of the Malkavian land, Laura Danvers. You wonder, at least I would, if I was an investigative sort. Luckily, I'm not that bored to need to be so. why and how the shelter who have given in to their baser impulses have been positioned in places to either seize power or control power by being the confidant of those in power.
The shelter does certainly seem to have a knack for finding its way into precarious situations.
Yes. And do you know why that's possible?
Enlighten me.
The only thing keeping you all from being destroyed. I am venting the swirling energies that you all sit atop of and do nothing with. Without me, the plans laid into place by Capone and Don Castiglione and fought against by that who? Jonathan Myers. Who did he believe he was trying to stave off the efforts of the purported Shadow King? You see what that's gotten. You see what's become of him. He's not here. He sacrificed himself so that you all would be able to hold on to what little power you had. And here we are 3 years later, and none of you all have even bothered to align yourselves with the energies that course through the very fabric of everything you call home. You know what happens when you superheat a gas in a confined structure?
It expands, and the containment breaks.
And without venting that gas, with it being superheated, unused, untapped, unloved, and unwanted, what do you think would happen to each of you all? You've been touched by the dragon roads at the shelter. Success is there for you to be had if you but tap into it, if you but attune to it, if you but use it for your own goals. If you don't, and I grow bored, what success did I choose? And I decide to stop venting those energies. What do you think happens to you? What do you think happens to the shelter? What do you think happens to each and every last one of you?
Presumably, we get crushed under the force.
Oh no, nothing so grotesque as that, at least not physically.
Then what is it that you see coming about?
Your immortality becomes a cautionary tale. The tyrannical rule of the kingship that is the shelter ceases to be. You'll be a footnote. You'll be an example of what not to do. But if you want to turn into that skid, go ahead and use your little scalpel. I assure you, one of us will continue on tomorrow night, and it will not be you.
Kind of lightly chuckles at that and taps his finger on the scalpel. That is not what I would be using if this situation were to go awry. No. This, gestures to the ensemble as a whole, has gone from something of a burglary into, I presume, a bit more of a deal. As you said in the beginning of this, my price. Yet you've not defined explicitly what for. You mentioned this dragon vein, and he's very animately talking with his hands. This dragon vein road thing, whatever the hell it is. But I don't quite get what your benefit is. Entertainment? Watching Hestia climb higher just to be there when she finally topples?
No, I came to Chicago for one particular thing. One singular, solitary of vengeance, of revenge. I am a Rossellini. I was damned, Rossi. But I am a Rossellini, and the Puttanesca are our enemies forever. Castigliones and Tori, an offshoot little twig of a branch of the Puttanesca, has usurped the bulk of the Puttanesca's interest in the Chicagoland area. From St. Paul, Minnesota to Hollywood, Florida, they have carved out nearly every facet of the Puttanesca. They deprived me of my revenge, and as such, as they are in fact Puttanesca, they gain my enmity forever. I came to Chicago to kill Don Castiglione, to end him physically, to enslave him spiritually, to lay low the entire line of Castiglione and Torres. And when I get here, do you know what I find? He's laid his tenterhooks into the vast bulk of the spiritual landscape. So much so that once he no longer physically exists, he still exerts power and influence from beyond the grave. Right this very moment, his daughter, hidden away and masquerading under the mask of a demodel, is crawling and climbing her way into power in Gary. Right this very moment. And soon she would have propped up the real Prince of Gary, Maxwell, sufficiently enough to sunder the alliance of the Shadow King. In doing so, Castiglione, through his daughter, will subsume full control of the Chicagoland area. Because for another 3 years, there's nothing anyone in the tower might do to stop him. The only hope, shelter. So a little success, a little venting, a little stopping through chaos is all I can hope for until I am strong enough sufficiently to end him permanently, to enslave him permanently.
And how does one of our number attuning to this road tie into your plan?
The more directly you all tie into the shelter's strength and power, the less I have to vent, the more I can use to achieve my own goals. You all are picking up crumbs and being awash in the backwash. And for everyone who gives in to their own drives and own pursuits and uses that energy as best as they can, they achieve some measure of success. Why do you think the shelter is so acclaimed despite, well, being terrorist?
It has seen Rather goddamn strange.
So,
Huh.
is that the price for your life?
The drop of blood would get me killed. Is that what you're saying?
No, the drop of blood will make sure that your soul never rests. Attacking me physically will make sure that you know no peace. How do you think I know everything I do? Am I just pulling it from the ether, or do I have my own sources close enough to know your action? To be abreast of what you've all managed, what you've all done. Physically, there's nothing I could do to stop you. Personally. Spiritually, while successful you will be, in obtaining a singular drop of my vitae. Spiritually, you won't ever leave this room easily for the next 50, 60 years. Perhaps longer. Every night that your associates have watched, every moment you've skulked out there in the shadow, I've watched you through my resources. Every conversation you've had with and about Damien, I've been there listening. Every subtle aside that you've all made has been with my permission. Because I've listened, I've watched, I know what you have done and what you might do. The might solely based on pattern recognition. The have done because of eyewitness accounts. And of all of you all, I assume that you, being one of the newest members of the shelter, that you might listen to reason. You might actually decide to do something. You might decide to actually assist in their success instead of letting life happen to you. Instead of building your walls like Jericho, fortifying yourself, thinking you can wait out the storm, thinking you can turn a blind eye to everything that's been happening around you, thinking that a whispered word in the right ear will save you. Words have power, true. But doing something gives those words even more power. What do you say? For the sake of your shelter, your friends, your associates, for yourself, will you do something? Or will you do the wrong thing and make sure that they lose all semblance of hope and chance at survival?
You know, that's actually, he says, just straightening himself up and taking his eyes off into the distance, off into the dark as he runs his train of thought. That's actually something that I've been rather annoyed about since I've came here. Since I've looked about, taken my survey of the land, and figured out who's doing what to whom, and what they're doing in return. Since I've embedded myself in the shelter. And let us be clear, they really need to get better at vetting people. But since I've taken my time to figure out who, what, where, and when, I keep asking the same goddamn question. Why? Why has the illustrious and somewhat horribly lethal shelter let so many of its thorns remain in the skin? It's infuriating.
Yes, that's the reason why I left them. Plotting, planning, whispering, and standing around watching. Not much I could do with won't help them achieve theirs. Every bit of advice given was ignored or ruled out through consensus. Every bit of advice actually given was ignored. Because they didn't like me. They didn't trust me. They are young enough of mind to believe that liking and trust is the same thing. So I had to do things on my own. And I've done as much as I am willing and able to do to assist them. Venting the energy is the best I can do for them. The rest is on them to actually do something.
Storyteller, given that I'm getting this absolutely lovely color commentary in the play zone, what is the overall feeling that I'm getting from her speech? Does it come off as an attempted manipulation for malicious intent, or is it the simple, exasperated, I've done this 100 times speech of a woman that is attempting to get what she views to be the last door to open and finally get done what needs to get done?
That is an interesting question. What is Aaron's insight?
3, with a specialty in lies, making it 4.
Captured him. Now, what is his wits?
That'll be 2.
So 5, 2.5, rounded down is 2. Is his average. 6, his average with specialty is 3. Unless, of course, she's telling the absolute truth, then it would be 2. So between 2 and 3, the half of which gives him, without a shadow of a doubt, he can tell, using every trick of observation that he has learned over the course of his extraordinarily long career. Theo, have you ever been staked before?
Theo ate some steak before he was turned into a kindred.
So he's never been penetrated by a long, hard shaft.
Well, there was that one time at the library when the dust got on him, and then Hestia and Aaron staked him.
Oh, he has been
Aaron
penetrated
Ryan.
before. So Aaron penetrated him, or would the Hestia drive the stake home?
I think it was Hestia. I'm not sure though.
Why not both?
Are you
I think
saying
she
that
said
Hestia
something
and
about
Eiffel
pegging
Towered
or
him?
something. I'm not sure. I
Hey,
think
look,
so.
any hole's a goal, and with the wonders of violence, there are so many new holes.
That is horrible and very apropos for the shelter as a whole. All I have to say, when that happened, when he was pierced, punctured, penetrated, otherwise perforated against his will, it hurt like a son of a bitch. And then some. This is so very much that and then some. Because at least during in his chest, he's got meat, he's got mass, he's got girth to tolerate that perforation. It sucks. especially when it breaks through the rib cage. It sucks. It's horrible. It's just ridiculous. However, in the arm, there's not much mass. There's not much girth. So when the stakes punch through, with them being slightly dull on purpose so as to not split the wood, it is excruciating. The mind behind this, the mind behind these, having a special skill at finding the most sensitive of areas and going exactly next to it so that you're thankful it's not as immediately soul-searing painful as you expected, but it's so much worse because of the expectation and realizing how close it was, realizing how much more pain it could have been. It's a psychological as well as physical torment that whoever laid out the security for the shelter had planned on. And while the trap, you could tell based on dust and debris, it hasn't been triggered in a very long while. There is definitively the unsafe feeling, which you have not felt in your own person since your last birthday. We know what happens on your birthday. We know what the outcome is. Detracting from the time you have to strengthen yourself enough, to isolate yourself enough, to grow strong enough that nothing else can be taken from you. You forward or do you flee back to the areas that you already know? Do you continue trying to find the alcove where you might let off shots? Or do you head back as quickly and safely to the areas where you are hopefully sure there aren't any more traps laid to keep lures making their way inside the shelter?
I start backtracking because Theo is definitively out of his element at this point. If this was digital, he'd have a chance. The fact that this is not digital, yeah, he's out of his element. He's backing out of this place. Careful to take the steps of what he knows so that he doesn't hopefully trigger another trap.
Rats moving
Pay
closer,
attention to the
expecting you.
rats where they going, by the way.
The rats drawing closer, hoping that you fall to the traps. And it's clear they've what? Mapped out the places, trained through instinct, or hoping to capture someone else who's fallen into the traps that they might dine additionally. It's that last part as it begins to settle in mentally that you realize that's exactly what they were doing. They're the scout force who are waiting for you to fall prey to one of the traps so that they can feed. Most animals stay away from kindred. Most animals shy away from kindred. Most animals naturally don't consider kindred as sustenance or, let's be perfectly honest, prey. Yet there's the unsettling touch that causes the hairs at the base of your neck to stand on end. All the hairs on your forearm standing at full attention as you realize those rats are scouts. Those rats are scouts for a colony or two, or who knows how many, who consider you unserved lunch. You could probably shoot them. You're good enough to pull it off, right? They're big enough. Size of small cat. You can peg them. You can let off a few shots, but the firearm works, right?
I could, but first, it's probably best to get into a more safer situation before they all bum rush me and push me into a trap.
Theo finds himself in the mall. It's an unused mall in the middle of Gary. There's a little coffee shop that's been there for the last couple of months. Started by a husband and wife couple. They've made the place cozy and comfortable. They're homeless individuals who spend the night there, and unlike most other places, it's open very, very late. They purchased pretty much the entirety of the mall, but they only use a small portion of it for the actual coffee shop. Theo finds himself there, the lights clicking off one after the other, causing the darkness to grow as the overhead lights blink out, then blink out, then blink out, moving further and further away from where he is. And the moment that that farthest light goes off, and the emergency lights are supposed to trigger the light above the exit, the light above the entrance into the coffee shop, and the alternating emergency lights that typically stay on during situations where power is lost, those on the independent circuit of the building. But they don't come on. Instead, there's this squeak, this chittering that's out there in the dark. And all at once, a million pairs of small, beady red eyes flick on. And it takes them a second to realize that they're all small, beady eyes instead of just little glow bugs off in the distance. Because as those eyes begin to flicker and blink, they're growing up and over his head, surging like a wave preparing to crash down on him. Looking up at that mass of furry, wet, failing, patchy fur filled with eyes. Takes him a second to realize that's not a memory he actually has. Takes him a second to realize that's not his moment, that he's not there in that mall, but that someone, something was there. And he understands that that very much is what could be happening here in the shelter. Being fed, growing stronger, growing fatter, staying at a distance, but still very much viewing kindred as prey. Smart enough to not begin hunting the humans. The homeless men, women, and children, the families that are actually part of the shelter. They're not hunting them. They're not encroaching on them with enough ferocity to cause them to leap into dastardly determined action. They're just keeping the food locked up better. They're just making sure that it's relatively rat-proof containers. They're making sure that there aren't any scraps easily obtainable inside the shelter. But that, for a colony of rats as smart as this, wouldn't really mean all that much. They could easily nibble their way through 10%, 20% of the shelter inhabitants in one night. Yet they don't. Theo's a man who understands puzzles. He understands games. And it is clear that the rats, the armistice, the peace contract, the peace treaty with the rats is giving them time. His understanding of the traps that laid behind him now that he's fleeing gives him time to contemplate those rats, those wingless bats.
Reteller, could I possibly use insight and maybe make an association as to how said rats got to that location and how said rats were able to congregate under the shelter without no one knowing?
What's your insight?
2.
And what's your wits?
A 3.
2? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you can. The easiest way, which is probably the most accurate way, the simplest way, they were already there. Someone brought a colony and fed them kindred vitae. They were already there. They were already being trained. They were already being marshaled towards a goal. This is the behavior of things that have been trained to do things, released into the wild into their own recognizance. How they got there, well, kindred vitae makes the living stronger, faster, tougher, meaning that each of their members, drunk with power of the kindred vitae, could easily go and take over another colony. And the average colony being anywhere from 20 to 1,000 means that there are 1,000 colonies they could have easily taken over, begin procreating, and creating their own armies, their own royal guards. Because unfortunately, most people fail to realize that rats are very much like humans, very social animals that need others, but they're also very much slaves to their own personal issues. Their want to control, their want to be loved, their want to be viewed as pretty. And they'll do whatever it takes to get a little bit of that star shine from someone who is powerful, pretty, smart, dangerous, tough, whatever it takes. And like a program populating itself, Theo understands why the Nosferatu had the bats. Theo understands how this colony of rats are an epidemic and waiting to happen. Theo understands how they got from the shelter to wherever the bats were roosting for the day to hunt them. Because that's, he's positive, is what happened. They used their strength, their speed, their guile, and their sheer numbers to overwhelm those poisonous, venomous things and tear them apart limb by limb and feed them to others and then devour the others. Then those were devoured. And that vitae being doubled and added to. And before long, there aren't any more bats in public. And before long, through the wars of consolidation, they will eventually have enough numbers to actually act on their predisposition to hunting kindred openly. Not just lapping up the droplets of vitae that you're leaving behind yourself as you make your way away from those clearly trapped, darker sections of the shelter. And Miriam, rats are such lovely things, aren't they? Especially when they walk around on 2 feet. There was a saying about Omerta, about the difference between a snitch and a rat. A snitch just tells what they know. A snitch has a job to do. And while no one likes a snitch will do what they do. A rat works at your confidence. It chews its way into your house. Then it brings its friends into your house. All of the fleas and insects that lie in its wake. It poisons your house from the inside because it chewed and fought and clawed and got inside your truss, only to bring your house down around you. That's why the old Cosa Nostra and various other criminal gangs from around the world had this disposition of unparalleled hate for rats. The snitch just tells what they know. It's part of the job. The rat works to get inside of your defenses, works to be considered something non-offensive and out of the way. Can't be a better end than silence. The peace that it offers, the opportunity to commune with our thoughts, the opportunity to mull over the truths or lies we've been told, the opportunity for the world temporarily to stop spinning, hurtling through space, rushing forward into the void. All of that ceases to be in a quiet moment. Sound of your own blood rushing in your ears, your own heartbeat annoyingly loud. It creaks and squeaks, bone on bone, cartilage squeaking and squeezing underneath the pressure. All of those things disappearing in the silence. Truths, and then there are facts. Facts can be used to determine our personal truth. Facts can also be used like jail cell bars and hold us from actually doing the greatness that's in us. And as the kindred of the coterie of this shelter come to grips with their evening's failures, the ever-growing silence of the world takes hold of them, each of them coming to their own understanding of the matters lying before them. And I would like to thank you all for a lovely episode, and see you guys next time.
See you next time.
Heck yeah. Oh man.